Southeast Radio's Business Matters with Karl Fitzpatrick.
My final guest this morning, John Staunton, is an Irishman who has set up his retail-focused business in Amsterdam. John, since you started Countr just 18 months ago, you've deployed the POS in a box to over 3,000 customers globally. So how does the point of sale in a box work?
So the point of sale is a tricky one for retailers. You know, it's a piece of software that's combined with hardware, and what we're trying to do is make it as simple as possible for a new business or an existing business to get something up and running. So that basically means that they should have a one-stop shop for their payment solution, for their transaction solution, and for their hardware. So it's POS in a box. You literally could walk into a wholesaler or a cash and carry, buy a box, and that's your POS software and hardware done.
So traditionally, how has it worked for retailers?
Usually they'd go through one of the bigger companies, so the likes of Micros or maybe a reseller, so POS hardware company or one of these companies, and they'd have somebody come install the POS. They'd pay them an annual maintenance fee. You know, they need somebody to come out and do software updates for them, and it's kind of a big undertaking, which is why it's one of the first things any new business will go for is look at their point of sale software, get that ready and lined up, and then maybe launch 4 months later.
So essentially, Countr is a software as a service platform that is fully embracing the cloud environment in which so many retailers now actually operate anyway. What was the trigger behind the creation of such a system?
So we actually started off as a loyalty provider. So you could use any card in your wallet as a loyalty card, essentially. So a contactless bank card or your Lewis Pass, your Leap card, or anything you wanted to use as a loyalty card. And one of the biggest challenges we came across was actually connecting to the point of sale. That it was very, very difficult with these older providers who are a bit more traditional based, maybe a daily update of transactions, a daily synchronization. They're not very open, and they didn't have APIs or easy ways to connect to the point of sale. So we looked at this and found that actually they were going to charge an integrator like us 50 to 100,000 just to make the integration. So that's euros. So we decided we'd be quicker, cheaper, better to build our own point of sales from scratch and build one with the retailer in mind, with the customer in mind, and with third parties in mind, so extra services could easily be added.
And is the software compatible with the existing hardware products that retailers may already be utilising?
And as far as humanly possible, we try and use off-the-shelf hardware, so Star and Epson printers that most people use. We use standard barcode scanners that, again, everyone's used to and everyone already has. And we try and use the existing payment terminals, so Verifone, Ingenico, the Worldline, those kind of terminals. So, yes, essentially.
Now, Countr POS is one of a number of products to emerge from Shopper Concepts. What is Shopper Concepts, and can you tell us about some of the other products that fall under this umbrella?
So, Shopper Concepts is the parent company of Countr and of our loyalty platform, Bazook. And that's the company we started about 3.5 years ago. It's essentially a holding company it's a software company that holds all these different products that we're developing. So some of the others there, I've mentioned Bazook, the loyalty platform, a couple of times. We have a data analytics platform that is unnamed because it's only white label at the moment. And we have Countr, the point of sale. But we're always looking at what are the new ways we can exploit the new technologies, cutting edge technologies, whether it's Bluetooth beacons or NFC or whatever's coming next. And we create a product underneath the Shopper Concepts umbrella for that.
And are all your products aimed at the retail sector?
Typically, yes. So it's not just retail. We use retail in a broad sense. So it's retail, HoReCa, or over here term, I guess, it's hotels, restaurants, and catering. Fast-moving products, so over-the-counter, fast-moving food. But we use retail as the umbrella term for it.
And what are the current trends that you're seeing in the retail sphere?
There's some interesting ones. One of the things we've noticed a lot recently is instead of what everyone traditionally thinks as bricks retailers, so offline retailers moving online, we've actually seen more of people starting with a web shop with an online business and then moving offline by creating pop-up stores and then eventually moving to a full physical presence. So we're seeing a trend in the opposite direction to what traditionally was. And we're also seeing a move away from fixed point of sale to mobile point of sale. So carrying a tablet around while you serve your customer in the store and giving them a much more personal experience because you have real-time information about them, their previous purchases, and about your availability in the store and what offers you can make to them.
Now, just in relation to those e-shops that are now coming onto the high street, setting up pop-up shops, and if they work, then they enter into a longer-term lease. Do you see that trend growing in the years ahead, and is it sustainable?
I do see it growing. Is it sustainable is another question, but I do see it growing mainly because it's very easy to begin online. It's easy to set something up. You can have a web shop up and running in 10 minutes, have your products there. So it's easy to test whether there's actually a demand for your product. And then, of course, you can start the capital-intensive bit of setting up a physical store, and you can take that small step of a pop-up store and go to a big store. So I definitely see that it works and it's going that direction. Is it sustainable? I don't know. It leads to a high turnover of businesses, potentially, if people try ideas and they don't work and they move on, which I guess in the longer term is a good thing. People aren't wasting months and months on a business that was doomed to failure from the beginning. So I don't know if it's sustainable, but I think it's very interesting.
Now, looking to the future of retail, we see Amazon exploding, eBay always very, very popular. We see new platforms like Etsy and others appearing as well, experiencing phenomenal growth. Do you think that the future for the local independent retailer, if they're going to go online, that they sell through those existing channels instead of going through their own individual website?
At the end of the day, everyone wants to have their own brand, their own identity, and their own presence. So if Amazon, Etsy, eBay, and so on solve that, where people can really stand out in their own unique way rather than just becoming one of many, then there's a potential that they'll all fall under one. But I do see that the web presence, the online presence, is just a tool. It's just a way of helping sales and of helping to inform customers. Because with a lot of products, customers want to touch and feel it before they'll buy it. And that's where it becomes more important that once you get the customer in the door of your shop, they're not coming in, trying out the product there, and then walking away and buying it online somewhere else. But rather you're able to help them there and then. And there's companies like Yippee, for example, it's a Dutch company, who can give you a real-time offer in the store. So the store can set up a personal offer for you, for me, based on my behavior, but also based on what are the prices of the products I'm looking at online. And they could do a limited time offer in my store. So it's more about still getting your customers in the door and making the sale there and then, where you can build a relationship. But online is just a tool, and whether it's through Amazon or through an individual web shop, doesn't really make a difference.
So really what you're saying is that the future of retail is all about personalization.
Yes, it's about targeting, personalization. It's about dealing with your customer as an individual, not as a mass market, not as a segment. It's a person.
There's lots of disruption going on online in retail at the moment, with Amazon introducing replenishment shopping, and in addition to that, of course, working with beacons. How much of that disruption do you think is going to fizzle down to the independent retailers?
A lot of it is filtering down to them, especially the beacon type technologies. One of the big issues with beacons, though, is that you have to have an app for a beacon to really be useful. So you have to install an app and give permission to connect to the beacons. And that means more apps have to go onto your phone, and people have limited real estate on their phones, and they're not willing to install more and more apps. So really, for beacons to become something for the smaller retailers, there needs to become one kind of a killer app or killer service that applies across the board and people have. Or somebody like Google needs to put it into Google Now, and Apple puts it inside Siri or into Apple Cards. These kind of things need to happen to really make it interesting for the smaller guy, because they won't have their own individual app. And in that case, things like beacons are useless to them. Now,
John, you have a good insight into what's happening on a global sphere when it comes to retail. What advice would you give to local independent retailers now?
You have to have an online presence. You need to have something online so people can find you, people can look you up. Because the first port of call for everybody now is effectively Google. When I want to know where to get a product, I look at Google. Even in a very small town, you'll pretty much look online to get an idea of the price, the features you want, and then you'll go into a high street store. So certainly people have to be willing to embrace online, embrace the idea of selling on more than one channel, and embrace the idea that the experience should be the same no matter how you sell, whether it's over the phone, whether it's online, whether it's in store. For the user, it should feel like one store. It shouldn't feel like a web shop or a physical shop or a phone sale. It needs to be one experience. And this is a bit of a challenge for more, let's say, established retailers. I don't want to say older, but more established retailers tend to be a little bit more phobic of online, thinking it's not for them, thinking it's something that they can never get into. Most web shop creation platforms nowadays, like Lightspeed eCom, like WooCommerce, they're essentially point and click. It's easy to set up a web shop. So I think that element of fear needs to go away, and people need to be more willing to to try it, to give online a go. It's not a young person's game. It is a game for everyone.
Now, John, your business, Shopper Concepts, is primarily a tech company. I'm wondering what prompted your decision to base yourself and your business in Amsterdam. We often hear about tech companies going off to Silicon Valley, but we rarely hear about them going out to set up in Amsterdam.
Yeah, Amsterdam is it's one of these new up-and-coming hubs in Europe for tech startups particularly. There's a big financial technology scene here. There's a good tech scene here. There's good talent here. For me personally, I was already actually living in Amsterdam when I set up the company. I was working here. My wife is Dutch. My son is half Dutch. So I was already living here, and my partner, my co-founder, also happened to be here. But more the decision to stay in Amsterdam was because of the good tech culture, because of the opportunities here, and because of the easy access to, let's call it mainland Europe, and easy access to the rest of Europe.
And how does the Dutch system compare to Ireland in terms of the supports that are provided to startup companies?
I think there's a lot of similarities. So we spent some time recently, a delegation of us from the Netherlands went to Dublin to kind of connect the two tech scenes. And we were in Dogpatch Labs and a few other places in Dublin. And a lot of it is very similar. I think there's organizations here in the Netherlands who are doing great work with subsidies and grants, but Enterprise Ireland are also doing some great stuff for startups. They're really trying to get grants, get subsidies, and get people to come to Ireland. I think both countries have the similarity that they have English almost as a first language or as a first language in Ireland. I think that really helps because you can get talent from all over the world, you can easily communicate with customers from anywhere. I think they're huge advantages. Differences, I think, is that Dublin is a little bit, Dublin, Ireland. In terms of startups, in terms of the tech scene, there are very few big shining examples. So, of course, Stripe is one. The Colston brothers have done some amazing things. But there are very few big examples yet, so the thinking is still a little bit local rather than global first. Whereas Amsterdam is very much, because of their VOC culture way back in the day in shipping, they're very much global first, then local, is more the thinking. So it's just a difference in attitude at the moment, but give it a year or two and that'll completely change in Ireland as well.
What do you think is going to change it?
I think the fact that someone like Stripe is a unicorn, Stripe is $1 billion company or several $1 billion company now, I think that gives an example to younger entrepreneurs that, hey, an Irish company can be huge. We can really make it big really, really fast. So that barrier, that little bit of fear goes away. And I think on a little bit more my own personal level, Ireland has become a lot less begrudging towards success as we get a bit more used to it, I guess, in many ways. So you're no longer pulled back down again if you start to rise up, which was maybe the way 20 years ago. And it's now a bit more about supporting each other and encouraging each other, which I think is where the startup community is really coming to its own in Ireland. So I think it is going to change over the next couple of years.
Now, the technology sector is viewed as being highly capital intensive. So with that in mind, how do you fund the ongoing capital requirements of your own business?
Tech is viewed as highly capital intensive, but in reality, you can get hosting for a very, very low cost. So you can start a tech business very cheaply, but the labor is where it's costly. So it's getting good tech people is where it costs. So for us, for financing it, we did some crowdfunding rounds initially. So we got some crowdfunded investments in, and then we took on board some informal investors for a couple of $100,000. So now in total, we've raised about €850,000 over the last 3 years, and we've used that to fund the business to the point where it is now.
And do you see a situation in the future whereby when startup tech companies start out, that they'll end up in a situation whereby to bring staff in, they're giving them an equity stake instead?
Yes, I think that's becoming a culture now. I think becoming more and more. It's always been the way in the US, is that people come in for an extremely low salary and take an equity stake. But even so, I think there's a difference between expectations now, and this is across Europe, in terms of new startup joiners, expectations in what equity stake they'll get. If you're coming in as an employee in a company that's a year old, then there's people coming in with an expectation of 20 or 30%, whereas the reality is somebody like that should be getting maybe 1% to 2%. So that's still a bit of a difference, and it's a mindset that typically only applies to younger people in the I want to come in, I want to give something a go, something I really believe in. And, if I don't get a salary right now, I don't really care. I don't have a family. I don't have kids to support. So it doesn't really matter. At this point, I'll give it a go. Whereas, of course, once you get up a little bit further on, then that's not really an option. So you can kind of get more junior people for that kind of a deal. But if you want more senior people, you typically have to pay a salary.
So I understand that you're currently in talks with the airline industry about using your technology in its retail operations.
Yeah, it's an interesting one because we talk about cloud-based, which of course is the airline industry is the ultimate cloud-based. But we talk about cloud-based, and it's something people see. But of course, airlines and airplanes at the moment are typically offline. It's changing. Wi-Fi is available on board, but typically they have to do transactions offline, and that's something we can support fully. We've got clients in sub-Saharan Africa who work offline for 3 months at a stretch. But the airline industry is one that's really, really interesting, where you still see when you're on a flight, between Amsterdam and Dublin, you still see that they note everything you buy when you buy a cup of tea and a chocolate bar or whatever. They note it on a piece of paper and keep the cash in a little paper cup, which of course is not ideal for tracking transactions, for knowing what you've sold, for managing stock levels and so on. So it's something that could very simply be fixed, be changed for the price of a tablet on each flight. So that's something we're looking at and we're talking to several airlines about. We're already working with one of the airports on loyalty, so we already have kind of the connection there, and now we want to build it out to the airlines to bring everything together between what you get on your flight and what you get on landing in the shops and offers you can do across the whole industry.
Southeast Radio's Business Matters with Karl Fitzpatrick.